Hey, what's up everyone? We're a few hours away from league start and I wanted to drop a quick update now that we have both the 323 PoB update and some more information now that I've had a chance to look at these Ascendancies some more. First off, I want to say that there isn't much for us in Warden and Warlock. Primalist will almost certainly be the best in slot for many builds, but we don't know a lot about the charms, so TBD. I'm personally probably going to start Primalist and just YOLO and hope for some decent charms. There are a couple of the interesting things to talk about though in Warden and Warlock. One I'm most excited about in Warden is Lesson of the Season. So degens are the weakest part of the build, and this provides a ton of defense against bleeding, ignite, and poison. Now we're a right side build, so I expect to have a lot of bark stacks, and this should provide a ton of reduced duration for those ailments. If you were going to go full tank, I'd probably trade a Herald for this. Offensively, Warlock has Foul Pact, which looks great, and Pacify. The downside of this is that you need to be able to inflict a third curse. Now you can do that with something like a Cosprey's Will instead of a Kintsugi. It'll make you a little squishier, but this is still a high evasion base and plays just fine. Another choice is running the Anathema ring, but I actually don't like that ring that much, so I probably wouldn't do that. It'll introduce more mana pressure in your build. The biggest downside of this is it adds another button to what is already a button-heavy boss rotation. If you're okay with that, this is a decent amount of extra power and a little bit of defense, but I personally, like I said, I'm going to go Primalist. I'd also like to take a second to touch on a couple changes between the early and late maps trees that I touched on a little bit, but I didn't explain as well as I could have. So thank you for all the questions and the comments. I really appreciate it. And as weirdly as it sounds, I like talking about traps. So in early maps, you'll see that I do an Ascendancy swap to Swift Killer in late maps. So this is because a lot of our trap throwing speed comes from frenzy charges and charge traps. And Swift Killer provides us 200% increased charge duration, which means that during our Guardian fights, we're going to have our charges up the entire time in between Elder Guardian phases, for example. Uber Shaper, we're going to have frenzy charges when we get through the phases. We're going to have them up all the time during mapping. This is a really, really excellent quality of life for having high DPS uptime, and it's something that I would do sometime maybe in yellow maps. The second thing to touch on is that you'll see in Axe, I take 5% chance to throw up to 4 additional traps here, and the life regen when traps are triggered by an enemy. I do this because this is a huge amount of additional power at almost no cost, and you're not going to be overthrowing your traps in campaign. However, when you get a ton of trap throwing speed later, you want to have 5 additional traps placed so that you can preload up to 29% more damage on a boss. Now this is important because without it, you're going to have a trap limit of 17, which means it's a little easier to overthrow your traps, and when you're overthrowing your traps, generally you're losing damage. I've also added or clarified things in the notes section, so check those out if you haven't looked at them since I first dropped the build guide. Anyway, that's all I have. I'm really excited to start in just a few hours, and I'll see you all on the beach. Take care.